I am deeply honored to introduce somebody that has been my own hero since I really entered into the movement in 2019. She's someone I looked up to, learned from, and really inspired me to take action. She has become a friend to my husband, Michael, and I, and she's a partner with our businesses, Public Square and Every Life. Beyond her incredible transformation, journey, and immeasurable impact in the pro-life movement, there's really two things I want to quickly share about Abby that stands out to me. First is her unwavering commitment to standing for what she believes in. Abby never shies away from speaking the truth, no matter how difficult or unpopular it may be. If you know her, you would agree. In a world where truth is often subjective and lies run rampant, her strong voice and stance for life are absolutely essential for such a time as this. And secondly, Abby is a true entrepreneur. She's a dreamer. She believes that anything is possible with God. At her core, she believes that God can do all things, and I believe because of her faith in God, that's fueled her to have such a remarkable impact in all that she has accomplished in such a short amount of time. For those of you who don't know Abby, she worked for Planned Parenthood for 8 years, rising to the ranks to become the clinic director in Bryan, Texas. She was named Planned Parenthood's Employee of the Year in 2008, but after witnessing the abortion of a 13-week-old fetus during an ultrasound-guided abortion, she walked away from her job. Praise God. Her departure from Planned Parenthood made national headlines, leading to her becoming the pro-life speaker that we all know and love today. In 2012, Abby founded And Then There Were None, the only ministry in the nation that helps abortion workers leave their jobs and find new careers outside of the industry. Isn't that amazing? To date, she's helped over 650 abortion workers quit their jobs. Hallelujah. She's also founded many other ministries like Pro-Love and Love Line in the fall of 2019. Abby's best-selling book, Unplanned, who's read it? Anybody in this room? Has anyone seen the movie? It's amazing. That came out in March of 2019. She is the host of Politely Rude podcast and the author of Fierce Mercy, released in March of 2022. She's also a co-editor of Life to the Full, released in April of 2023. And Abby and her husband, Doug, they have 8 beautiful children. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the one and only Abby Johnson.
Thank you. Well, howdy. Okay, thank you. You're awake, right? You're awake, all right, cool. I am really glad that you are all here. I want to tell you kind of how, has any of you listened to the Sick and Twisted series on my podcast? Nobody. Okay, good. Okay, so this is all going to be new information to you. Okay, so I do have a podcast called Politely Rude. I don't know do any of you listen to that? Okay, good. All right. So I do have my friend Alyssa who's here. Okay. Yay, thanks for being a friend. So I do have a podcast called Politely Rude, and we did a series, my ministry and Then There Were None did a series called Sick and Twisted that we put it on Politely Rude. It was a kind of a mini series, and I want to tell you how we kind of came up with this. So is anybody in here like true crime? Like Dateline, stuff like that? Yeah. So most women do. And it's kind of a woman thing. And I go to a conference every year called Crime Con. Anybody heard of it? Yeah? Yeah. Well, yeah. My friend and I. Okay, so Crime Con is an amazing conference every year, and it is a true crime conference. Okay, so like the people from Dateline are there, and like Keith Morrison, my very favorite, and you guys are too young to know who that is, and it's really cool. So all of these like victims of crime, they're there, and they share their stories, and it's a really like neat conference. And if you don't like true crime, you may think this woman is crazy. But it is really cool. And so I was sitting at CrimeCon last year, and I was literally sitting in a breakout session like this, and I was listening to an FBI profiler talk about serial killers. And he was talking about profiles of serial killers, and he was talking about the way that serial killers always do certain things, okay? And he said that almost always serial killers have a signature, something that they do after each kill, or they keep a trophy, something from the victim that they killed, or something from like the scene, like the crime scene, right? And I started thinking about these things. I started thinking about the abortionists that I had known over the 8 years that I worked at Planned Parenthood. I started thinking about the 750 workers that have left Planned Parenthood, and the women that we have talked to, and the abortionists that they have worked for, and the stories that we have heard from them, the things that they had told us about the doctors that they worked for. And some of the things that we have been told about them were just, they sounded very serial killer-ish, right? And so I really started thinking about this, and I thought, oh my gosh, I really think that you could classify some of these abortion doctors truly, not in a hyperbolic way, not in an inflammatory way, not in a way where I'm just like a pro-lifer saying, you murder babies, so you're a serial killer, but truly in an FBI profiler way, like they're actually serial killers. And so that got me kind of going down this train of thought and really digging into the past histories of these abortionists. So we did I think it was 6-part series on various abortion doctors. These were all late-term abortionists. And we did this series on my podcast called Sick and Twisted. The series was called Sick and Twisted on Politely Rude. And I'm encouraging you all to listen to it because I'm just going to give you like kind of the high-level highlights. We went really deep into the lives of these abortionists. I learned many interesting things as we were kind of doing a deep dive, but I want to kind of talk through some of this with you guys, and I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions that may or may not be related to the serial killer thing, but just because you have an opportunity to ask questions of somebody who used to work in an abortion clinic, and you may have a question. So we'll kind of go through that. So one of them that I wanted to talk about, of course, is Dr. Kermit Gosnell. Many of you know who Kermit Gosnell is. Kermit Gosnell is a doctor that worked in Pennsylvania. There's many documentaries out about Kermit Gosnell. Probably the best one that's out, I believe, is called 3801 Lancaster, which is, that was the address of the facility where he worked. Dr. Gosnell is currently in federal prison for his crimes. Dr. Gosnell started out as a family physician in a very poor community outside of Philadelphia. And he, he's a black man married to a woman named Pearl. They have children and, started out kind of like as the community doctor in his area. and was even going door to door, helping low-income families. He was the good guy in the neighborhood. He was the guy going around helping all the sick kids. Dr. Gosnell was the guy that you could just pick up the phone and say, I think my kid's got a sinus infection. Can you come over here and check him out? And he was going to do it. There was a turn eventually, and I'm going to tell you about an incident that happened. It was called the Mother's Day Massacre, and it took place in the 70s, and all the dates and information is in the podcast, so I'll let you go and listen to it. But I'll kind of give you the gist of it. He had been working with another abortionist, a very dangerous abortionist, and they came up with the idea of this. They thought it was going to be this innovative way to kill babies in the second and third trimester, and it consisted of razor blades. And so they invented this device, and it was spring-loaded. It was a spring-loaded device that had razor blades attached to it. And outside of this spring, he had it coated with some sort of wax film, okay? And so they would dilate the woman's uterus, and he would insert this ball of wax into the woman's uterus. And the idea was that after some time, the heat from the woman's uterus would melt the wax, causing the spring to pop open. And the razor blades would then spring open and cut the fetus into parts, therefore killing the baby. And this was some new thing he was coming up with, and he was going to, he had all these new ideas for abortion. I want to be clear, abortion has been done kind of the same way. Abortion it's a simple procedure. Killing a baby they've been killing babies by abortion the same way for, about 80 years. It's not complicated. Abortions are not complicated. It's not a complicated procedure. And so I guess he thought he wanted to create a new way to kill babies, a new innovative way to perform an abortion. So him and this other doctor, they came up with this way. And then they would go in and they would pick out the razor blades piece by piece and pick out the pieces of the baby. Well, I guess they didn't consider that when the razor blades opened up, it would, of course, have the possibility of tearing up the woman's uterus as well. Duh. And so he did this. He brought in over a dozen women to test out this device, and it happened to be on Mother's Day. And so several women lost their fertility that day. Young women had to be rushed to the emergency room. They had to have emergency hysterectomies. Women almost lost their lives that day. Certainly, babies were killed. And no, neither doctors were charged with negligence, malpractice, nothing. They got away with it. So that was called the Mother's Day Massacre. And interestingly enough, it's very hard to find any information about it. But we did. And we talk about it in the podcast. Kermit Gosnell went on to continue murdering children. He amassed a large fortune doing it. Most of his work was done kind of under the table. Most of the people who worked in his facility were uneducated. They didn't have high school diplomas. They were people that he just kind of knew around town. Most of the women that worked in his facility had been patients of his facility. He was known to perform abortions at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a very clandestine operation. He was running a pill mill. He was running illegal narcotics drug ring out of his facility, and that was finally why the state came into his facility. Not because he had killed women by abortion, not because of all of the complaints that had been filed against him, not because of anything else, but because they were concerned about the amount of narcotics that were going in and out of his facility. When the state came in to take a look at what was going on, they were shocked to find jars and jars and jars of babies' feet in formaldehyde jars lined up in his lab. He did not properly dispose of fetal remains. He would cut off the top of milk jars, milk jugs, and he would just put fetal remains in the milk jugs. He had freezers full of frozen body parts. He had a basement full of decaying, decomposing babies because he did not want to pay a biohazard medical waste company to come and pick up baby parts. He would just start flushing them down the toilet, eventually hoping that he would continue to get away with not having a waste company come and pick up body parts. Eventually, at some point in time, the city did get involved because he stopped up a drain pipe in front of his clinic with body parts, human body parts, and it ended up flooding the entire city block. One of the city plumbers came out in front of his clinic to try to figure out what was going on, why the entire city was blocked up, the water wasn't working. They went into the water supply and everything, and they found a large baby, about 26 weeks, that he had tried to plunge down the toilet, and that was blocking up the entire city water flow in that block. Again, the city did not come out and investigate when that took place. When they went in, they also found a book of photos of women's genitalia. He took photos of the women's vaginas, women that he aborted their children. He would take photos of their vaginas and keep them in a book so that he could peruse them later. Now, trophies, signatures, marks of a serial killer. I ask you, as a person, a man, Dr. Gosnell, who kept the baby's feet of the children that he killed, who kept the discarded bodies of the babies he killed in basements and freezers, a man who kept the pictures of genitalia of the women that he aborted their children of, do you think that Kermit Gosnell might fit the profile of a serial killer? Yes, I agree. And I think the most interesting thing that in 3801 Lancaster, and I do encourage you to watch it, it's a really good documentary, they actually interviewed him from prison. It's really chilling to hear him. He's still alive. They interview him from prison. And they ask him if he has any regrets about what he has done. And he says, no, absolutely not. Why would he have regrets? He said something like, one day, medicine is going to appreciate all that I have done for the medical community. Friends, that is psychopathic. He is a sociopath. I believe he is indeed a serial killer. There's another man named Louis Klopfer. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. He ran a facility in Indiana. A very interesting man. He has a very, very interesting upbringing. I'm not going to go into all of it. It would take too much of our time, and I want to give you guys lots of time for questions. Louis Klopfer, he died. I'm going to say thank God. He died. And when he died, they were looking in they were looking in his home. They were looking through his things. They popped open the trunk of his car, and he had hundreds of aborted babies in the trunk of his car. Why? We don't know. They continued to, that led them to want to probe even more. What was this guy doing? They went and looked in his home. They found thousands more. Thousands more of aborted babies just stashed in his home. Dr. Warren Hearn just announced his retirement on January 22nd, thank God. Dr. Warren Hearn was the last, he was the last, he was the only current doctor who would abort a baby up until 40 weeks gestation, electively for any reason, in the United States, and he just retired 3 days ago. He has been doing abortion since before Roe v. Wade. He is a multi-millionaire. He has an incinerator in his Boulder abortion clinic so that he himself can take the bodies of the babies, put them in the incinerator, and cremate them himself. He has a crematorium in his own clinic. I think the most interesting thing when I've been at the Boulder Abortion Clinic is just the location of his abortion clinic. It's just right in the middle of everything. You know? It's right in this medical district. You know, there's restaurants around. There's like medical places everywhere. There's a hospital close by. People are walking everywhere. You know, it's busy. It's a busy foot traffic every area. And right there, you know, as you're like walking to Qdoba or whatever, like as you're walking to go get a salad or there's a man electively killing babies up to the 40th week of pregnancy 20 feet away from you, and then cremating their bodies just right there. And every day he would walk into his job, he would walk into that office completely unopposed, because after all, it's Boulder, Colorado. And anything goes in Boulder, Colorado. But they did have a public parade for an elk that died in their community. Just to keep things in perspective. They had a public funeral for an elk. Dr. Warren Hearn, after every woman would have an abortion, they would be sort of sedated, and he would try to wake them up by slapping them somewhere on their body and getting really close to their face and saying, "You're not pregnant anymore." And he would walk out of the room. Dr. George Tiller was shot in his very liberal pro-abortion church several years ago. I was working in the clinic when it happened. And his father was an abortionist as well. He took over the family business. Dr. Tiller was a late-term abortionist. Dr. Hearn and Dr. Carhart, Dr. Leroy Carhart, were all late-term abortionists, and they became very good friends. They all met at a National Abortion Federation conference and bonded over their love of late-term abortion. They became very good friends, all opened their own practices, and would argue. I saw it happen actually several times at National Abortion Federation conferences. They would argue about the best way to kill a late-term baby. They would stand up at a microphone in a session and they would argue about the very best way to kill a baby in the third trimester. I remember Dr. Carhart standing up at a microphone and explaining to us the value of giving women go bags during a late-term abortion. This was probably in 2016. This was kind of a new concept, but most of the time, during that time, women would always stay to labor in a clinic, and they would go in and they would stay to labor until the baby was delivered. But Dr. Carhart was tired of staying in the clinic all night long. And so he decided that he was going to give women go bags. And so he would start the labor in his clinic, and he would give them a red biohazard medical waste bag, a pair of scissors to cut the umbilical cord. He would give them some blue chuck pads, those large pads that absorb fluid. He would give them some gauze, and he would send them to a hotel that he had prearranged. And they then, if they delivered their baby, they could put their dead baby and the placenta in the bag and bring it back up the next day. That way he didn't have to stay in the clinic all night long and wait for them to deliver. I remember first hearing about that in probably 2005, 2006. These men, these people, these late-term abortionists, these people are serial killers. There's just no other way to describe them. And unfortunately, these people are training a younger generation of serial killers. They're training a younger generation of doctors to be even more cold-hearted. I have to say that these doctors, Dr. Tiller, I knew all of them. Dr. Tiller, Dr. Carhart, Dr. Boyd, Dr. Hearn, they didn't celebrate the killing of babies. They did it. I think they enjoyed it. I don't think it bothered them. They certainly enjoyed the riches that they made from it. But they weren't out there at rallies. You know, you wouldn't see Dr. Tiller out there at a rally holding a sign. He wasn't that type of guy. They weren't those types of guys, right? They would do an interview or something if you asked them. But they weren't out there on the steps of the Supreme Court or anything. They weren't those types of abortionists. But we have bred now, and they are teaching now a new breed of abortionists. And these are the abortionists that are proud to be abortionists. A lot of them are female. And there's something really even more disgusting about a woman, a mother, who can look at a child in the womb and do what these men do to children. But these are women doing it. They push down every motherly instinct in their body. They suppress it. They abnormally suppress it. And then they celebrate it. These are the serial killers that we are bringing up in our society now. And they're proud of it. So I do encourage you to go listen to this, series. I think it'll be very eye-opening for you. I think you will see that as we started doing some digging on this, I know one of the men that I worked with, he was in the Hungarian army. He was an abortionist. He had done late-term abortions. And I remember asking him one time about abortion, how he'd gotten into it and everything, and he was telling me in the Hungarian army he had been, forced to kill children and all of this. And during a conversation, he had told me that he actually believed in infanticide up until 24 months post-birth. He believed a woman should have that choice. And I said, well, why 24 months? Why not 25 months? And he said, well, you have to stop somewhere. Just completely subjective. But when I listened to his life, when I listened to the callousness of the decisions that he had made throughout his life, I kind of realized that it had been a series of choices that he had made that led him to the place where he was in that moment. It wasn't like he was just this good OB working in this great, medical community delivering babies, and then one day he switched over and started killing babies in the third trimester. And I think you'll find that with these men that we highlighted in this series. They all lived through a very dark time in their life. They were raised, George Tiller was raised by an abortionist. They were raised in really strange situations. They had strange parents. They made really strange decisions. Many of them raised in very sinful situations. They made very sinful decisions before they got to the point where they decided they were going to be late-term abortion providers, before they decided they were going to be abortion providers, period. And I want to tell you, that's exactly how it was in my life too. I didn't go from being a good Christian girl to one day walking into a Planned Parenthood building. It was a series of choices over time that led me into walking into a Planned Parenthood building and working there. Then having abortions of my own. Then being the Planned Parenthood director. It didn't happen overnight because that's not the way that sin works in our lives, guys. Sin overtakes you one little step at a time. For me, it started with behavior. It started with immodest behavior. And I don't mean just the way that I dressed. I mean the way that I spoke, the way that I behaved. The attention I wanted to seek from men. I liked the way that they were treating me when I behaved a certain way, and so I craved it more and more. And then that led to immodest relationships with boys, things I shouldn't have been doing. And then that led to immodest physical relationships. Improper physical relationships with men. And then that led to my first unplanned pregnancy. And by that time, I was really separated from God. Because I knew if I talked to God about what I was doing, what was he going to tell me? You got to stop doing this. And I did not want to hear that. Because what I was doing was fun. Because sin is fun. If sin wasn't fun, we wouldn't want to do it. If sin sucked, it would be easy to turn it away. But sin is fun. That's why we want to do it. And that led to my first unplanned pregnancy, and that led to my first abortion. And that first abortion was my first foot in to the abortion industry. Friends, if I would have never had that first abortion, if I would have never had that first impure relationship with that boy, I would have never worked in the abortion industry. And if I would have never worked in the abortion industry, I wouldn't have the souls of 22,000 lives on my conscience. I know that you see me up here. I know that you see me out in the crowd this morning. I know that you see my life. I know that you see I have this movie. I know that you see I'm friends with Matt Walsh, and I have all these really cool connections, and I do all these really cool things. But let me tell you something. This is not the life that you want. These lives of these men, the money that they have. You can look at the house that Dr. Hearn has, and it's incredible. It's up in the mountains in Colorado. It's beautiful. It's exceptional. He drives an incredible car. He has all these incredible things. And oh my gosh, Abby got to speak at the Republican National Convention, and she knows Trump, and she does all these cool things. I would give it up in a second. I would give it up in a second if I could take back every single abortion I ever participated in. You see, you don't want this life. You don't want a life where you say, man, I had to be redeemed from my past sin. You want a life where you can say, I can't even relate to that chick. I can't even relate to the crap she's talking about because I have always lived in the will of God. I don't even know what she's talking about. Man, I'm glad I'm not her. Because I've just always walked in the will of the Lord. That's the kind of life you want. Not this. It's not worth it. And even if you had made that decision, even if you have gone too far in your relationships, even if you have made that decision of abortion, redemption feels a whole lot better than bondage. And it's never too late to turn around and make a decision that honors Christ.